Welcome to the Six Comms podcast. I'm joined today by Kai. Hello, Kai. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to be on your podcast. Well, I'm feeling a bit tired from a full conference that I did, but really excited to be here to have this conversation with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited about this. The episode is called Embodied Communication. And I think it would be nice to start by just kind of defining some of the terms that we'll be using so that listeners kind of understand what language we're going to be talking about in this episode. So, embodied communication is one phrase that we'll use, and also somatics as well. Perhaps you could just share what those two terms mean to you.
Yeah, let's start with embodied communication. So I really like this term because as an ontological coach, ontology essentially means the way of being, which includes three domains, one being our body, emotions, and our language. And the word embodied comms essentially captures the body and language. We, in conversation, in interacting with the world, our brains can't exist in isolation in those situations. We have to bring our body into those. And so it's about how do we communicate in a way that's authentic to the internal sensations that we're feeling in connecting with someone across from us and being able to build a relationship with them in a healthy and positive manner.
Great. Love that. We can't just bring our brain to the room. We come with all of us into the room. And it's very difficult not to notice things, isn't it? If you're having a conversation with someone and then you feel something in the body or something's not quite right, it's difficult to just ignore that. And we maybe should be listening to that a bit more.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like, well, firstly, it's difficult to ignore our internal sensations. At the same time, I think we often don't think about it enough. We often just place too much emphasis on the brain work, coming up with the most intelligent answers, trying to impress, or sort of thing. But yeah, you're right. And then somatics. Yeah, I recall that you asked that as well. So somatics, well, the root word of somatics is soma, which has Greek origins that essentially means the body or the living organism. So
The body, a living organism. And there's so much that we've got to take notice of, so much that goes on in a conversation to make it positive and productive. There's a lot to think about, isn't there? And there's also, like you say, a lot to feel and notice and respond to. So now that we've got like a sense of what embodied communication and somatics are, how does the body language, our body language and our physical presence shape the way we communicate, both consciously and unconsciously?
I think at the end of the day, fundamentally, we want our intentions to be understood. I don't think we come into the world wanting people to not understand us. For what we say, we would want the person we are speaking to buy into the whole package and to believe us. And when we say it, it's also how we say it, right? Body language and bringing our presence. Maybe I can just answer that question by starting with unconsciously first. So how we communicate unconsciously and the effect that it has. And often I find this to be the case that we're not aware of how we show up in a conversation. We just kind of quite focused on thinking about what the person is saying, processing it, thinking about what our response should be. There's no right or wrong in this, but I feel like as someone practicing ontology, somatics in my coaching with clients, it's all about bringing awareness to the rest of our body as well and using that as feedback to then enhance the results that we're trying to get in communication. So that when we're often unconscious about our body language and our physical presence, what we say may not match our body language and our internal emotions. And when we don't mean it, we end up making promises that we either have the intention to keep, but conditional. For example, if I tell someone or someone asks me, say, hey, Kai, would you like to go for dinner? Because I may want to not disappoint the person or make the person happy. Like, yeah, sure, let's go. But in my head or kind of in my body, I know that didn't feel right. I didn't really feel like 100% yes. It could be a yeah, sure, on condition that it's near my place, on condition that it fits the time and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we may not share that. Or actually just make promises that we have no intention to keep at all. And when that happens, I think the worst thing that can happen is a breakdown in trust. It's a breakdown in relationships. And we often think that we have no choice but to be this way, to just say something, but have that be disconnected with what we're feeling, just because we feel like, oh, we have to keep peace, we have to make people happy. So when it comes to being aware of our internal sensations, then the next move will be to move towards how do I align my internal with the external and what I say in order for people to then feel me differently and that, hey, something's different. Like, I don't see like she's putting out like a facade or anything, and I trust her and I want to carry on this relationship with her. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because what you're saying is, well, the word that's coming to my mind is some kind of an alignment. So you talked about matching. So how you're showing up, your energy, your body language, your facial expression, whatever that nonverbal is, does it match with what you're saying? And I suppose as you're giving me the example of, you say, okay, sure, to the friend that asks you out for dinner, it's also effective communication is the responsibility of both the speaker and the listener. It's a 50-50. It's kind of a bit of a dance between the two. So I'm wondering, at the same time that you're maybe noticing this internal feeling, is the listener who you said, okay, sure, I'll have dinner with you, are they picking that mismatch up? Are they noticing it? And I just wonder how conscious people are about picking up nonverbal cues.
What do you think actually about that?
I'm not sure, because I think it's difficult, first of all, to be self-aware. I think we have a lot of blind spots that we don't even realize. And until we get constructive feedback on that, unless we do, and unless we seeking it out, we can be going along quite happily, merrily, blissfully in ignorance of what we're actually doing and how we're showing up and what impact that has. So if we have that lack of self-awareness, how can we notice it in others? And I'm not expecting an answer from you. That's a thought that just came to my
that,
mind.
well, that's a good question. And I'm so wondering, just to add to that, we may not be self-aware, but when we receive that from someone, let's call it like a misalignment. I think oftentimes we may relate to the case where we leave that conversation feeling something feels amiss. Something's not quite right, like in the tonality, mannerisms, maybe they were frowning a bit when they're saying it. You get a sense. And I think there's a lot of power in listening to our gut and intuition as well, in trying to make sense of whether someone is embodying communication in a wholehearted, genuine way.
And I think you're right. I think it's easier to notice that in someone else, like the impact it has on us. But I think it's more difficult to be aware of how we're showing up and if we have misalignment. That's quite challenging. So can you kind of share with us an example of when somatic awareness transformed maybe a more difficult conversation or helped someone become a more effective communicator? So it might have been an example that you experienced yourself or you saw in someone else. Could you share with us an example?
So, like before I answer that question, I was wondering if we could just do a bit of exploration around and how then can I be conscious? So I was thinking about that when you asked that question earlier. And I think, one of the ways is to just practically speaking, do a body scan. Like just have a pause to say, okay, in this moment, what am I feeling? It's kind of picture like a laser pointer going from the top of my head, slowly all the way down to your feet. Like, oh, like my heart is beating really fast. Or, oh, I'm feeling tension in my jaw. Oh, what does this mean? And just simply by being conscious of that, will give us really quick feedback in terms of how we're feeling and then making a choice of what we will next say. So I think to your second question about a moment where somatic awareness transformed a difficult conversation or helped someone be more effective in their communication. Well, I thought, why not just share about myself? It's like a personal story and see if that relates. So I recall I had a difficult conversation with an ex-boss. And at the time, I was feeling quite stressed, not overworked. I think the workload was okay, but I was just feeling really stressed because I felt like I couldn't match up to their expectations. to do more, to do better, to do faster. And that kept me on edge a lot. And I was feeling a lot of anxiety for weeks. At the same time, during that period, that was when I got introduced to a new field, which is the Ontological coach training program that I just graduated from, which taught me about heightening my somatic awareness. So then I asked for a conversation with my boss in that context of having gone through some training to share some feedback and to receive some feedback from them. So given like the past history of this boss, I went in feeling really frightened. I'm not sure how it would turn out. So I kind of did a little body scan at that moment and I felt, okay, my heart was palpitating really fast. My hands were sweaty. My feet were sweaty. And I was like, okay, so I know I'm anxious, but what is my intention in this conversation? I want to remain open when I give and when I receive feedback. So if I wasn't conscious, or I would probably just talk to my boss in a very anxious state or, closed up and like tensed because I'm kind of just flowing with whatever I was feeling. But given I was conscious, I intentionally kept an open stance. So I recall I was putting my feet firmly on the floor, even though I had the urge to curl them up, like, ooh, firmly on the floor. My body was not slouched or moving forward. I was just leaning backward. And my hands were in front of me in an open stance like this. And I was thinking to myself, when my boss gives me feedback, it comes to the hands. It's not going to hit me directly. I don't feel like I'm attacked or I just want to be defensive and curl up. It will all come to the hands. Just going to visualize that it all comes down here. It's in front of me and I have the choice of how I want to take it in. And because I was centered in this way, the effect was different from, let's say, past conversations I had with them, where I managed, just my presence and them noticing a change in me created a safe space for them to share their honest thoughts that, hey, actually, Kai, I was really pushing you very hard because I was pushing you towards something, progression in your career. And for them to share with me honestly, like, hey, I made the assumption that was what you wanted at the point in time without confirming with you at all. And I found that really powerful because as a boss, it can take a lot of them to admit that they made a mistake. And because we had that conversation together, it just brought like the trust that we had with each other to the next level.
And I would imagine that that didn't take that long, did it? Like centering yourself and then imagining the feedback that's being received by your hands and a body scan. Like how long would you say you needed to, in order to feel ready to have that conversation?
It comes with practice. So the more practice you do outside of those situations, so by practicing even when you're not feeling any threat or any anxiety, that helps you to quickly get centered in such situations. What really helped me was acknowledging that, hey, I'm centering all that. I still feel anxiety.
Yeah.
And that was true for me that moment, and it's okay. But then breathing deeply, getting myself centered, just a few seconds.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Because I think as humans, we're tapping in and we're sensing. I mean, it's a survival mechanism. We're tapping into and mirroring the energy of each other. So when you said you showed up with a different energy and he responded to that, that's mirroring going on there. And we instinctively do that as human beings. I find that very powerful. And actually, it reminded me of a previous episode I've done on this podcast with a wonderful facilitator called David Pullen, who's based in the UK. And he was an actor, actually, in his previous life. And then he started his own business with his wife. And he talked about this tip that he has for showing up positively and openly as a presenter, especially in virtual spaces. And he talks about UFO, and it's not what you think. So it stands for upright, forward, and open. And so it kind of reminded me when you were talking through that of how you prepared that sense of being upright. So the centered, the forward, welcoming in, but the open as well, like opening up your heart to receive.
I have a different take on that though.
Okay, go ahead.
So openness looks like this to me, where I'm actually going backward and just receiving with open arms. In this body position, I'm the most vulnerable, right? My veins are showing, someone can attack me. So that to me is openness. When I'm forward, I find it harder to be open because I'm more focused on something or I'm more resolute to get something done. So the energy I feel is different for me.
Interesting. So I wonder then, I'm curious now as to perhaps every individual has a different open looks different for every individual. But also I think there's that balancing act of being able to effectively communicate through a screen. So when it's on screen, it's how do you show up? It might be open for you, but I would suggest like a back away from the camera is creating a distance. So it's like, how do you find that happy medium between feeling open and comfortable, but also being aware of the channel or the platform that you're using for it to
So let's
be
do a little experiment.
oh,
So will you be okay with that?
yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to create a feeling of distance. I'll try at least.
Yeah. So if you're just listening, Kai's moved right the way back from her camera and she's kind of lower than me now. She's really in the distance. And what I'm noticing is I'm feeling quite awkward now. Yeah. It's interesting because even as recent as yesterday, I had another guest on and it took us about 5 minutes to get the positioning right because I have this thing about videoing this podcast. We're good now, but I like to be equal to the guest. She was over the other side to the far corner of her screen. So I made her reposition so she was equal to me and a bit closer to me in terms of on the screen. And she said the effect that had on her was that she felt like it was a more intimate conversation. She felt a lot more closer to me than her original position. It's interesting.
Yeah. So what I did just now was creating distance, sort of feeling of being distant from you. What if I did that again, like go backwards, but in a different way and see if you notice anything different?
Okay. So she's going back and she's keeping centered. So she's not in a corner huddled up so much. Yeah, that's more comfortable. But you look so small. You look like you're not going to be fully with me.
Interesting. I think such conversations matter because I could be feeling open and being with you, but you might not be. But oftentimes I feel like people don't even have such conversations about how we are making each other feel. We leave or even be in a conversation just having assumptions about, yeah, they must be feeling that way or they must be thinking that, and it can lead to more like miscommunication.
Yeah. How often do we just say, do we come on a screen and say, the way that I'm positioned and I'm sitting right now, how do you feel about that? Like it's such a simple question, but how many of us are really doing that? And I'm constantly asked this, like people that work remotely and virtually, they're constantly saying, how can I engage people more? And I'm going, first of all, is your camera on? And what are you doing in the non-verbal sense? It's not just about the way you're speaking. And that's really what we're saying about embodied communication. It's not just your brain and your mouth that has an impact. It's everything about it. It's all what's going on with your body, your face, the way you position to camera, how forward you're sitting, how far back. It's all of that because you've only got this square in which to really show up in the most positive way.
Yeah. But I want to make a point there about too much performance versus being authentic. Because we can do things right, in air quotes, whatever that means. It's like, oh, okay, like communications looking like that and smiling and all. But if it's performative and we're not like really being that, feeling that really, we're just doing, the effect will be different. Like, I think people are smart enough. The gut will tell them that something's wrong, you know. She's just doing it. She doesn't really mean it.
So you've got to find what's comfortable and authentic and genuine to you. But like you said, it's a bit of an experiment, isn't it? But it's worth having those conversations. You're right. And opening up those questions. That's a fine line. Is it performative or is it genuine? That's a fine line to judge. So I'm sure there are lots of listeners. There's lots of clients that you work with. There's certainly lots of people I work with that struggle to feel calm and confident with those high stakes conversations, like the one that you just mentioned with your boss. I would define that as quite a high stakes situation, meaning that if that went wrong, there would be kind of quite negative consequences to that. And so when we're giving constructive feedback or receiving it or having those more difficult or challenging conversations, it's really difficult to stay calm and confident. Other than the body scan and what you talked us through, is there anything else that people can do in terms of technique that can help them stay a bit calmer?
Say, go back to the basics to first ask themselves, what does feeling confident and calm look like to you? Because like you said earlier, what I see as confident and calm may look very different from what you see confident and calm as.
Yeah.
So stay in that question, break it down. What does my body in confidence and calmness look like? So for example, just using myself, okay, feeling confident means bring my chest up a bit. My eyes will be looking slightly upwards into the distance. There'll be a bit of sparkle in my eyes. I'm smiling slightly. I feel stable, like grounded. My presence, like, like royalty, like a king, fully owning my presence, and my feet are slightly wide apart. I'm breathing deeply, calmly. Like that to me is confidence. Then, okay, if I'm in a high stakes conversation and I find myself feeling anxious and the urge to like, I just want to be in the opposite, curl up and start tensing up my shoulders and all that. The first step would be, I would say, okay, in those high stakes conversations, you want to center really quickly. It's not about suddenly shifting your stance into like a very different from what you're like doing. And then someone will be like, what are you doing? Like, that's really weird. Like, you were different like a few moments ago. But I think the first simple thing you can do is just to breathe deeply. That is so simple. And we hear that a lot, but we often forget to breathe. And if you think about it, breathing is one of the first few habits we learn the moment we're born. We don't even think about our breathing. So if you're not aware of how we're breathing, like in those high stakes conversations, it could turn from deep, calm breathing because you come in feeling confident to like, oh, I'm getting anxious, and it gets shallower and shallower, and you just kind of lose it, right, in that moment. So breathing, and well, there are a few other techniques, and there's no right or wrong or which one's better than the other. I can just share a few. Like one of it would be just noticing how your feet feels on the ground, like feeling the full length of your feet, or it could be just noticing like the surround sound, someone's breathing and all that, just to pull you quickly to the present. Or it could be your hands. If you're kind of putting them together, your fingertips are touching, you could be feeling what are the sensations with each fingertip touching each other, like what does that feel like? And those little things just bring you back to the present moment. You're not feeling anxious. Your mind is not in the future. What if things go wrong? Or in the past, like, oh, that used to go wrong. It can go wrong again. But you're just in the here and now.
And do you think, like when you mentioned the fingertips touching, when you start experimenting with like feeling centered, because some listeners won't even know what that feels like, or they haven't done that. So if someone's like really starting out, if the more that you do it, the more you might start noticing, oh, well, touching my hands or my fingertips in a certain way is my signal to be more centered. Like, do you have like a centering thing that you always do?
I always do the body scan, and I realize my habit is to walk quite fast. But by doing that, I can feel easily anxious or stressed. So I would consciously slow down and feel, how does my feet feel as it slowly touches the ground, it rolls forward. And well, everyone has a different centering practice. I think when I first did it, it's not good. And I think with whatever you do for the first time, it won't be good. Well, meditation is something that is familiar to people. I would say centering. So meditation can take like quite a long time to do, like half an hour or something, where you just seated or standing and you're like doing that breath work. Centering is just a very short-term version of that can happen in like a few seconds or even a few minutes. Oh, one thing I do as well, like now I just remember, is, this, if you can indulge me in this.
Yes, yeah.
Put up your hands.
Putting up our hands.
Bring them together. rub it. And later, when you let go, just notice the sensation between your hands.
Oh,
So don't name it like, oh, it's tingling or whatever. Like, don't name it. Just notice the sensations. So
okay.
let's do that one more time. Because your mind momentarily switches off. You're not thinking of other things. You're just focusing on the sensation.
Oh, I love that. That's a really nice tip. Powerful as well. Yeah, that's great. And it's so important nowadays when we're like online meetings, we've got full schedules. We might not have very much time in between interactions. It's such a quick, easy thing to do to just get ourselves present and more focused. Love that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, other than what you've just talked us through and the body scan, and I love that idea of receiving the feedback to the open palms, your hands in front of you, and then making a choice. Like, what am I going to do with that feedback? That actually reminds me of something I say. It's like when you receive feedback, you don't have to take that on. Like, you do have a choice. There is a choice there. And is there anything else? If I was to kind of push you into giving us like 3 practical tips that listeners can take from this episode, if they want to be a more embodied communicator and they want to use some of these somatic practices, what would they be?
I think the first tip is get feedback. And you said it earlier as well. So get feedback from people you trust on your somatic habits that you might not be aware of, your blind spots. So, for example, do you say that you're open to feedback or open to change, but when you say such things, your body actually is closed and you're not aware of it? It's just a slouch or something. Or maybe you're smiling, but it's a tense smile, like, do you frown a lot? Do you talk very fast? And what's the effect of that on people? So notice the effect of these habits that onto the results they get in life. So for example, as well, like if I find that I'm just kind of going through my life and, hey, like, why is it like people don't seem to trust what I say? Or they think that I'm always angry or frustrated and I feel so misunderstood. So kind of that's my story, right? I feel like I'm so easily misunderstood by people. And I just pause there and think, actually, what is the presence that you bring into those interactions with people? Aside from what you're saying, because you can say, so in coaching, so I just came out of a conference and we did this practice, which was really cool, where we did a peer coaching. The coach only says the same thing over and over. Like, for example, so what? So the client says, yeah, I want to get good results in school. The coach says, so what? And the client talks a bit more and the coach says, so what? So that kept going on and on. And you realize that there's so much going on that's non-verbal. When you're saying so what, or even the silence in between and the presence you bring into those moments can make a lot of difference in that conversation. Okay, so that's the first tip, get feedback. The second is to recall, deconstruct, and create. I would just say it's that. Because firstly, recall your body in an unpleasant situation, as many somatic details as possible. Do that body scan. I love that. Stay in that body, kind of get it back again, lift that body, and just explore with that. Hey, I'm in this body right now, it's unpleasant. But what language or emotions become easier to surface in this body? Then, and it goes to the third tip, which is identify the new or the unfamiliar body or somatic muscle that you like to build instead for a better result. So for example, if I'm recalling like a body of anger and I don't like that, and I know the sensations already of being in that body, then let's say, hey, I want to be less angry. I want to be more relaxed. Okay, so then what does that body look like? And for a moment when you do it, it will feel uncomfortable, but just sit in that body and think, okay, what are the sensations of being relaxed? So then now that you know a bit better about that new body, apply that in your little practices consistently. The more you do something, the more it becomes a habit. The more it becomes your comfort zone.
And be comfortable with the uncomfortable at the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So get feedback. So number 1, get feedback for your blind spots. So the things that you're not conscious of from a trusted friend or colleague. Second, recall and body scan a time when you weren't feeling comfortable or you were feeling anxious or angry. Kind of deconstruct what that is And then thirdly, identify what new body you would like to inhabit in those situations and what that feels like, and apply that consistently so that it becomes a habit. It becomes the default. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think if you go back to the like performative being a fine line, there's a fine line between performative and being, well, I would say to that, by letting your body lead, it can feel performative at the start, but there's nothing wrong with that if it kind of allows you to surface new possibilities. We don't always have to follow our brain, That's not the only source of like intelligence that we have as human beings.
So that has been fascinating. We could go on for longer. I find this subject really fascinating, and it really is a topic that I think people really need to think about and be more aware of. But perhaps we are very brain centered and not in our bodies. I have to confess, I need to do a bit more work with my body. But it's been great. I've loved your tips. You've reminded me of the body scan that I heard quite several years ago, but I've not been practicing that so often. So thank you for that little prompt. And I'm sure it's been helpful for listeners, especially when you're talking, giving your example about those high stakes conversations that you've had with bosses and things like that. One question remains that I ask all my guests, which is Six Comms is founded upon the 6 C's of effective communication. And they are the first three, which are connection, curiosity, and compassion. And then the other three are clarity, customization, and consistency. Actually, some of them you've already mentioned. And I know you are a fan of curiosity because you host a podcast too. And I love that we align on that. But what 1 C is resonating with you now most, and why? And if you could make a connection between that and the topic we've been discussing today, that would be great.
I would say compassion. Well, we are really hard on ourselves, and we may know that the body we're in, the habits we're in are not serving us well, and we want to shift into something more productive. But in that process, it's easy to kind of be harsh on ourselves and go like, oh, why can't I do that? Or like, oh, they can do it better than me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so lousy or whatever. Like, it's going to that spiral. And I would say just hold it lightly. I think even just being aware of the habits that we're not having somatically, that's a really powerful first step. So hold yourself lightly with compassion, as well as hold that compassion for others as we all try to figure things out. Like, we doesn't have to feel so heavy.
Yeah, I love that. That's so nice. What a nice way to end this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, Kai. It's been a real joy.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.